Hello, welcome. This is a specific broadcast for parents who are supervising children's home-based learning activities. This is for parents whose children may not have returned to school today, but even for parents whose children have returned to school today who want to supplement their learning. So to anyone who's tuned in for a typical broadcast related to political events, this is not that broadcast. This is for parents. I'm going to be looking at an academic paper regarding the relationship, which is consistently observed between parents of children with autism and developmental disorders, but also parents of children who are more typically developing children. And that is parental responsiveness and parental attentiveness and its role in facilitating language acquisition and word building or vocabulary enrichment. So the paper I'm referring to today was published in 2010, but it's been supported by multiple other studies since then. Typically, developing children have been shown to have a broader vocabulary if, even as babies, their parents respond to the baby's gestures and facial expressions as if the baby is trying to communicate. I think it's fair to conclude that babies are trying to communicate in a baby way with their facial expressions, their coos, their mimicry of adult expressions. They're trying to engage. And when parents are very responsive to that and establish a transactional dynamic of you say something and I respond, you're establishing a conversational dynamic that implies an exchange and helps condition the baby to human life. They make a noise, you make a noise. You imbue their utterances with meaning that may not be there. And you're helping activate neurons in that baby's brain that will help map an idea that meaning belongs to certain sounds, that pleasure can be derived from communicative exchanges with other human beings. And those neural pathways, that positive enjoyment with the act of communicating, sharing a moment with others, will enrich your baby's brain and enrich their development, and is a habit that can be also translated to interaction with young children, even older children and teenagers as well. And I can describe that. So I'll go and just see if there's any commentary. No, there's not, because I don't have my typical audience for this. That's okay. I'm endeavoring to build an audience for this. So if you're one of my usual audience and you're not a current parent of young children or school-age children or even college-age children, please consider referring this broadcast for replay to friends or family members who do need help or encouragement, because I'll try and do this on a regular basis on specific days to offer that type of reassurance, advice, and responsiveness to questions. So what's an example of a baby communicating with an adult? Yes, mommy loves you. That's right. You're a beautiful baby, and that's some beautiful noises you're making. And to even respond back in kind, in babble, boo 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 boo. Everything you do is giving your baby an opportunity to observe your face and to mimic the contortions of your mouth and the movements of your tongue, and to aspire to mimic the sounds that you produce. So think of it as face-to-face contact time. Well, not directly contact time, but within observational distance. And that's associated with positive developmental trajectories for children, whether they be typically developing children or whether they be children who have been assigned a position on a spectrum of development. So I'm just going to look a little bit at this article again, because it expresses what I'm saying very well. So typically developing children frequently refer to objects uniquely in gesture, and parents can translate these gestures into words, facilitating children's acquisition of these words. Basically, if your children point to things or mime eating biscuits, parents can help them out. We know the word sounds for the word that you're referring to. Parents are helping children create a mind map, pairing that sound with the literal meaning, with that physical object or that metaphysical construct. So yes, typically developing children take advantage of parental input, but research shows that that also contributes to vocabulary growth in children who are neurologically atypical. So this particular study that I'm looking at now, they asked parents of children with autism and Down syndrome if they were accustomed to translating their children's gestures into words, and if so, whether these translations facilitated their children's acquisition of new words. So facilitate, make easier. To express that more simply, does the same principle work with typically developing children and less typically developing children? Does parental attention and input help children acquire new words? And if you are familiar with educational principles, you'll understand that vocabulary is a subject that underpins all learning in the school system. That if you're learning maths, you acquire vocabulary related to mathematical functions. Once you've learned what the word add, subtract, divide, multiply mean, you are more likely to grasp the concept of what performing those mathematical functions on numbers involves. And all children have various fields of interest, and when parents support their children's areas of interest, you're helping them overcome a bar of disinterest. It's a lower cognitive bar to leap over when you start with something that they're already interested in. So this starts with babies. You can have a mother who is very keen to add to their child's vocabulary, who brings out something that they like and says, oh, look, here's some flashcards, baby. And the baby will have a higher cognitive bar to jump over to engage with that introduced subject. Whereas a parent who follows their child's own, who observes their child's own direction of eye contact or direction of vision to see what is the baby looking at, what is the baby interested in, is helping that baby to work with what they're already interested in. You have less of a wrench to drag the baby's attention to something that you're imposing on them as an adult. So the tips are: work with what your children are interested in and parrot their language back to them so that you are establishing a conversational dynamic that has some element of equality to it, that you communicate with them at their level and that establishes a happy place from which to further extend and enrich your children. So what's an example of communicating at the level of a child? Parroting back some of their exact phraseology. So a child can say to you, ball, red ball, and you can reflect back those two words, red ball, yes, the baby's paying attention to that. You've already mastered that attentional goal. You're both paying joint attention to something. You can say red ball, roll the red ball. And you are introducing a verb to your baby and helping enrich or offering an enrichment opportunity to your baby. So if you are a parent with children home from school, please feel free to chime in with comments or questions, because I'm happy to answer any of your questions at this point or direct you to further research, study, or pedagogical approaches if you ask me questions. So are your concerns that your children might be lacking in various subject areas at the moment? Are you concerned that their learning pace is stultified with longer periods of time spent at home or spent exposed to devices. What strategies can you employ as a parent to stimulate your child's learning in these unusual circumstances, and thereby improve your children's mental health and your children's interest in autonomous learning, i.e. self-directed learning outside of any impetus from teachers, whether delivered directly or whether delivered through internet-based instruction. So to return to this article, this is an important point. Young children use gesture in word-like ways before producing their first words, and these gestures have been found to predict the content and size of their vocabularies and speech. So, for example, the earlier a child indicates an object in gesture, the earlier the word referring to that object will enter the child's spoken vocabulary. Similarly, the number of different objects children indicate in gesture at 14 months, the greater that child's vocabulary will be at age 4. To put that in simple language, it's predictive. If your child's making a lot of gestures and looking very engaged with the world at an early stage of their development, researchers are likely to find later on that that child is using words that correlate to those objects, to those gestures they were making, and a child will have more words if they were making more gestures. So a gesture is a sign of interest. I'm not switching topics, but I'm using as an analogy adult relationships, because some marriage counselors have pointed out that adults who make gestures of interest in something and are rebuffed, like, oh, look, honey, this is a topic in the newspaper, or have you seen what's happened? If their spouse ignores them repeatedly, that's indicative apparently of likely upcoming marital dysfunction because rebuffed gestures of engagement over and over again indicate a broader pattern probably of, who knows, contempt or disengagement that will likely result in relationship dysfunction down the track. Similarly, with babies on the plus side, when they make a gesture of engagement, if they smile at you, if they look to you, if there's an adult there prepared to engage with that child and respond to any overtures of communication, then you have an opportunity to reinforce positively that gesture and that effort to communicate with you, to look at you and smile to you. These are gestures of joint attention. If you look at someone or you look at something that someone's playing with or holding, that is an invitation, that is a moment, a teachable moment, if you will. So let's see if I have any questions yet. No questions, but I do have someone who was enjoying the topic, which is good. So again, just to reframe this broadcast, it is a topic specifically for parents of children who are either very young or are starting school, doing home-based learning, or whose current learning is possibly a bit behind. Parents who just want to apprise themselves of techniques to enhance their child's learning at home. Oh, wow, I have already a troll, which is okay, that troll somewhere else. I can ban trolls all by myself. I do consider myself lucky that this broadcast went for this long without trolls. So, a referent that a child conveys in gesture but not yet in speech. So, for example, a child pointing at a doll. If translated into words by the child's mother, oh, do you want your doll? If that transaction occurs, that verbal interaction occurs, with the mother framing the child's pointing into speech terms, those words are significantly more likely to enter the child's vocabulary as new words several months later. So if you think about it in a mathematical learning sense, every data point you offer the child of using the word doll in reference to what they've pointed at. Cup. Oh, you want your cup. I am using acoustic highlighting there to emphasize the word cup, knowing that a noun is the most likely word that a child will learn. It's got the most emotional salience to a child, i.e., it's significant to them if the cup is what they want. The do you want, that part of the verb is more superfluous to requirement, cup. The nouns are the key parts. So acoustic highlighting, using your voice to add emphasis to a particular word. Parents know this at an intuitive level. I'm just making it explicit in order to help parents use this technique. Oh, you want your cup. You want some milk. Emphasizing the noun, pitch goes up. You want your milk, or enhanced loudness or over articulation. Milk. I'm using my lips, mouth, and tongue to produce those sounds even more clearly than the rest of my speech, to make it extra obvious to the baby, the sounds that I'm making, which makes it additionally easy for a baby to replicate those sounds and to adopt at least an approximation of that word into their expressive vocabulary. So receptive vocabulary, that occurs first. Receptive meaning you understand it, you can receive it when you hear it. Milk, says the baby, I've heard that word before. I've had a few data points of hearing the word milk and getting the white stuff that I like. If it helps for people's minds to be refreshed with that story of Helen Keller learning language. So she was perhaps 7 years old by this point and had been rendered deaf and blind at approximately 6 months of age because of scarlet fever. Helen Keller's teacher, Anne something, had been trying to teach her words by spelling out the words into her hand. And Helen Keller hadn't yet got the concept. But one day, Helen was led to some water by her teacher, and the teacher pumped water into her hand and simultaneously spelled the word water. And at that point, apparently, that was the revelation. These gestures corresponded to what Helen was feeling in the palm of her hand. She was feeling this substance of water, and the word was being spelled into her hand, that had meaning. And then she understood that there was a world of communication possible to her. And Helen Keller is a very accomplished woman who read multiple books that were printed in Braille for blind people to read. She became able to use speech by comparing vibrations in people's throats and learning how to produce those vibrations herself. She became a public speaker, got degrees, was a very accomplished woman. But what I'm trying to highlight at this point is that mind map of that moment of realizing that that something that happens in the world, some metaphysical or physical reality, has a correlate in speech. So this is not a big audience at present, but that's okay. I appreciate that. This is a novel strategy that I'm trying to use. It's a service I'm offering to parents. I've been speaking for approximately 20 minutes. I think next time I might bring a PowerPoint presentation as well. And so it's just a free service I'm offering for parents who have questions and again are interested in strategies to support their children's intellectual development and educational development. So that's all for today. Thank you to anyone who listens on replay. If you come across this video and you know someone who you think might benefit from listening to this replay or interacting with a future broadcast pertaining to these same topics, vocabulary enhancement and how to support it in a home environment, And if anyone has different school-age children and they have questions about their development and their educational strategies to support their educational achievements in a home environment or in an environment that's complementary to a kind of on and off again schooling schedule, let me know. I'll be here broadcasting in this manner again. Thanks, everyone. Take care.